Welcome back. Now that we have a few tables put together, we need to get some data into these tables. And one way to do that is to import it. If you've been working with Excel for a little while, you probably have a collection of data and you're looking to import it into Access. So let's see how we can do that. Here we have the data file. This is an Excel spreadsheet, and I've put together some random data to populate the tables. We have the books, the customers, have a collection of addresses and contact information, and I have some checkout data that will match the table once we import the other two tables. First we're going to import the books, then the customers, and then the checkout data. So let's go ahead and see how that's done. Once again, we have the Collier Public Library database, and we're going to go to External Data. I'm going to close down the Relationships table, and then I'm going to come over here under Import and Link and go to New Data Source. One of the strengths of Access is that it can import and export to a number of different formats, so you can actually tie together a number of different data sources through Access, through one Access application. In this case, I'm going to go to the File Formats, and I'm going to choose Excel. And let's go ahead and find that data file. And there it is, it's the data file. So the next step is to decide how you want to bring this data into Access. You can import it into a new table, you can append it to a table, or you can just link to the table. For this exercise, I just want to link to the data. I don't want it actually in the database, but I do want to link to that Excel file. So I'll choose Link to the Data Source and click OK. And it sees the 4 spreadsheets in that workbook. So I'm going to choose the Books spreadsheet first, and as you can see, it shows all the data that you saw in that spreadsheet file. Now that I've chosen that, I'm going to click Next, and of course the first row does contain column headings, title, author, pages, etc. Then Next, and I'm going to leave Books as a linked table name. Finish. And it's finished linking. So now, as you can see, it has a linked table under the table list within Access. And if I double click on this, it actually opens it up and we can see the data in that Excel file. Now this data is read-only. As you can see down here, it says it's not updatable, but we can access it. And one thing that we can do is to import that data into the TBL Books table. And for that, I'm going to use a query. So let's go over here to Create and Query Design, and that opens up the Query by Example window. Now, queries are Access's way of communicating with the tables. You can manage all the data within your tables through queries. I'm going to go ahead and select the Books table and click Close. There are a number of different types of queries. For this one, I'm going to select the Append query, and that will actually append records to an existing table. The primary type of query that you'll be using is a select. That's where you're just selecting data, but you can also make entirely new tables. You can update data within tables, and you can delete data. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and append, and it asks for the table name. I'm going to say TBL Books. And that's in the current database. You could do it in another database if you had another database file, but we're doing it in this one. And I'll click OK. And now what we need to do is select these fields within the linked table and append the data into the TBL Books table. And first, let's look at the TBL Books table one more time. Let's go to Design View. You'll see that it does have a title, author, number of pages, published year, and so on. It has a lot of different information. So let's go ahead and start matching up the fields in the Books linked table to the TBL Books table. Let's go ahead and double click on title to add that. Author, pages, published, publisher. There should be a purchased field, you got the ISBN, in circulation, and the asset tag. And let's go ahead and expand this a bit, maximize this. Now that we have all those fields in there, let's come down here to the actual field detail, and you can see it has the field, the table, and it has an append to setting within the append query. And so let's see which one we want to add this to. The title goes to book title, author to book author, pages, number of pages, published is the published year. It's already matched up publisher because they have the same names. Purchased goes to purchased date. ISBN is matched to that one. In circulation goes to the circulation, and asset goes to the asset tag. Now, in order to go ahead and import that data, we go back to the Design tab under the Query Tools, and let's first of all click on the View button. This will give us a preview of what the query actually sees, or at least some idea of what it's going to do without actually committing the data. So it sees all that data, and it's going to try to import all of that into the TBL Books table. So let's go back to Design View, and let's try to run that. You're about to append 28 rows, and let's see what that does. And it seems to have run, so let's take a look at TBL Books, and you can see that it's populated TBL Books quite well. It's taken everything in there, and it's done so without any errors. We have the book title and all the other information in TBL Books, and as you can see, the primary key, which we did not select from the linked table, has populated with values for each row. So you have the book 1 through 28, and it's given each of those a unique identifying number. If we take a look back at the relationships, you'll see again how important that is, because it has that book ID that it needs to identify the row. And the checkouts table, when that references a book that's being checked out, needs to reference that value. So it's important that those values be in there, and as you can see, they are. So that's worked well. That's worked without any problem. The circulation field, in which I left a couple of blanks where the books have been taken out of circulation, that worked well. It left those unchecked. The checkout days has been filled in with 14 for each record, and let's take a look at the design of the table. As you can see, checkout days, there's a default of 14, so that has actually worked as intended. Each book can be checked out for 2 weeks, 14 days. So that's the books table. Now let's try that with the customers table. Let's go ahead and close that. We don't need to save the layout. And we can actually use the same query. We can just delete the books table. And let's go ahead and link another spreadsheet to that. New data source. From File, Excel. Go ahead and select the data file again. Link. And let's choose the customers spreadsheet. Next. First row contains column headings. Next. Link table name is going to be customers. And it's finished linking it. Let's drag that over to the query, and this time let me just go ahead and double click on the title bar to select all fields, drag them down here, and it puts them all in there. Then we can go to the append setting and start choosing the fields. But first, we need to change the actual destination table. So let's go over here to the property sheet, and if this isn't showing, you can always right click anywhere up on this upper part and select properties. So let's go ahead and change the destination table to customers, and then it should show us the right fields. Let me go ahead and close this. So that's showing us the right fields now. First name goes to first name, last name, and active goes to active, and card number. So those have been matched up. Again, let's go back to design and view, and it sees all that data. It's a good idea to get into the habit of using that view button first before you actually run a query. That way you can see what the query is likely to do before you actually commit the changes. So let's go ahead and go back to design view and go ahead and run that. You're about to append 100 rows, which is right. We have 100 customer records. Click yes. Everything's done. Let's go ahead and open up TBL customers. And again, it's imported everything. And again, it's assigned customer IDs to every record. It's imported the card number without a problem. And let's take a look quickly through these other fields. It's imported the zip codes. The field as it's set up is allowing for that 4-digit extension. The data didn't actually have those, but it imported it fine anyway. It's imported the phone numbers and the email, and it's handled the active and inactive customers without a problem. Let's go back and actually verify that a bit. That seems like a lot of inactive customers. Okay, we actually did have quite a few inactive customers, so that seems to be fine. So closing that, going back to the database, we now have both the books and the customers tables populated. Now, I did those first. We don't need to close that yet. I did those first. Let's go back to database tools and relationships, because those were the two tables that supplied supporting information. Now we have to do the checkouts. And opening up that spreadsheet again, now if we go to the checkout spreadsheet, you'll see how these IDs potentially match up with the data that we just created. Now, of course, if you had your own checkout data within an Excel spreadsheet, you probably would not be storing IDs as I've done here, but I did this specifically to populate this table for the purpose of testing, so that's why I'm using the IDs. If you had actual customer names and book titles here, then we'd have to do a little bit differently, but now I've anticipated the potential numbers that might be within the customer ID fields and book ID fields, the numbers that might be available, and so we can use those to see how that data works out. Let's minimize this and let's do that one final table, and it's saying the connection for viewing the Excel worksheet was lost. That's because you cannot access that file when it's actually open in Excel, so we have to close that. Don't save it, and let's just verify that we can get back to it. And let's hit F5. Let's say no, and it's being a little bit finicky. Ah, there it is. So now it's seeing the data again now that I closed Excel. Okay, so let's take this one out of here, and let's go back to the properties, and we're going to change the destination table to TBL checkouts, and then I'm going to create that new link, external data, new data source from file, Excel, link to the data source, and using the data file, and this time checkouts. And next, first row contains column headings, checkouts, finished. So let's drag this over here, and again double click on the title bar to select all fields, drag them down. It's already matched up customer ID and book ID. Design, view the data. When the column width in a table display is too narrow to show the data, it will show these pound signs instead of the actual data, all you have to do is expand the column a bit and you should see everything. And we'll see how it handles these dates. As you see by these dates, the due dates are generally 7 days later than the checkout dates. I actually used 7 days within the Excel data. You see December 27th to January 3rd and July 11th to July 18th. So that's 7 days. And the check-in dates generally match the due dates. In fact, they always match. These customers are always very punctual about returning their books. So that's rather basic data, but we can introduce variations on that later if we have to in order to completely test the application. But right now, let's see if that imports, because sometimes different date formats can be a little bit of a challenge when they're being moved between systems. So let's see how that works. Let's go back to design and run. It says it's about to append 200 rows. Yes, it seems happy. Let's go to 2EL checkouts, and it seems to have pulled in everything. That one's not checked in. That's fine. I left a couple of blanks in there, and that seems to have worked. If I sound surprised, it's because some things don't work the first try. Sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit. So now we have all 3 tables populated, and let's see how the tables really relate to each other now. Let's go ahead and save that layout. Let's close this. No, we don't need to save it. And create query design, and let's start with TBL checkouts, and let's add books, and you notice that it's added the relationship automatically. That's the relationship that we defined in the relationships window, and it's added automatically. Then we're going to go ahead and add customers, and we can close this. So now we have all 3 tables linked, and let's go ahead and select the checkout ID, the checkout date, and the first and last name of the customer, and then the title of the book and the author. And let's say that we're going to sort by the checkout date, because we have a sort setting here where we can choose which fields we want to sort by. So that's going to be ascending. We're going to start with the oldest ones and go forward. And then we're going to view this. Now this is a select query where we're just selecting the data and looking at it. So view and run are actually going to do the same thing. I'll go ahead and choose view. And as you can see here, it's showing us the checkout date, the name of the person who has it checked out, the book title, and the book author. So that's how those tables are linked back together. Because of the relationships between them, we're able to pull up just the details that we need. It's bringing the data back together in the way that we need it. Now, I could go back and add the person's address, I could add the book publisher, I could add any combination of information from any of these tables, but the key is that all of that information, even though it might be displayed over and over again in the query, is only actually stored once. It doesn't have to be stored over and over again for each record. So that's an example of how these tables and queries work together in order to efficiently store the information and bring it back together in the way that we need it. Now, in the next lesson, we'll start talking about designing forms with which you can manually enter new information as you get it, and in a way that minimizes error so that you can get your data into the database as you need it.